The dinner rush always faded the same way at the Willow. Not with a dramatic quiet, but with a tired sigh that seemed to pass through the walls, the tables, the bodies of everyone still standing. Plates stacked higher. Chairs scraped softly across the hardwood floor. The low jazz from the speakers turned almost apologetic, like it knew no one was really listening anymore. Janelle Brooks rolled her shoulders as she wiped down the last open table near the back window. Her feet ached in a deep, stubborn way that didn't go away with stretching. The kind of ache that settled into you and reminded you how long you'd been standing, smiling, nodding, carrying other people's evenings on a tray. She glanced at the clock above the bar. 9:42 p.m. Almost done. The Willow wasn't flashy, but it liked to pretend it was. White tablecloths that never stayed fully white. Candles that burned low by dessert. A menu that said seasonal, but never really changed. It attracted a particular crowd, people who wanted to feel important without being loud about it. Janelle had learned how to read them quickly. Couples celebrating something fragile. Families pretending everything was fine. Business types who spoke in careful sentences and looked past her like she was part of the furniture. She tied her apron tighter and moved toward the service station, checking her section one last time. Most of her tables were already gone. A birthday party had lingered too long and tipped too little. A pair of college kids had apologized more than once for ordering water. That was fine. It usually was. What weighed on her tonight had nothing to do with customers. Her phone buzzed softly in her pocket. She didn't take it out. She already knew who it was. Her mother never texted this late unless something was wrong, or about to be. Trey's prescription refill. The notice from the electric company taped crooked on the fridge. Rent due in 9 days. Janelle pushed the thoughts down and focused on what was in front of her. One last table still occupied. Corner booth. Single diner. He'd arrived earlier than most. Quiet. Well-dressed in a way that didn't ask for attention but somehow got it anyway. Dark suit, no tie. Shoes polished enough to catch the candlelight when he crossed his legs. He hadn't rushed. Hadn't complained. Barely spoke. Janelle approached with a practiced calm, notepad already in hand. "Can I get you anything else tonight?" she asked. The man looked up from his plate. His eyes were sharp but tired, like he'd been staring at numbers all day. "No," he said, polite, measured. "Just the check, please." She nodded. "I'll be right back." As she walked away, she felt his gaze linger a moment longer than necessary. Not uncomfortable. Just curious. She told herself she was imagining it. At the register, she rang him out and returned with the check folder, placing it gently beside his plate. "Whenever you're ready," she said. "Thank you," he replied, already reaching for his wallet. Their exchange ended there. No small talk. No forced smiles. Janelle moved on to clearing another table, stacking plates, wiping crumbs into her palm. When she looked back, the booth was empty. He was gone. She approached the table slowly, the way servers do when they already sense disappointment. The check folder lay closed. She opened it. Exact change. No extra bills. No scribbled note. Just enough to cover the meal and not a cent more. Janelle exhaled through her nose. She didn't curse. Didn't roll her eyes. She'd seen worse. Still, something about it stung. Maybe because he hadn't seemed careless. Maybe because she'd been hoping, quietly, foolishly, that tonight would surprise her. She began clearing the table, lifting the heavy dinner plate first. As she did, something white fluttered slightly against the dark wood. She froze. A folded piece of paper sat beneath the plate, placed deliberately, edges aligned. Janelle picked it up, her fingers suddenly unsteady. For a second she considered leaving it there, pretending she hadn't seen it. Then she unfolded it. Her name was written neatly across the top. Janelle. Her breath caught. She glanced toward the door, half expecting to see him standing there, watching. The restaurant was nearly empty now. The host was counting menus. The bartender was wiping glasses. Her eyes dropped back to the note. She read the first line. And felt the room tilt just slightly, as if the ground beneath her feet wasn't as solid as she'd believed all night. Somewhere between the quiet music and the hum of the lights, Janelle realized this night wasn't ending the way she thought it would. If you're still here with Janelle, take a second to subscribe. You don't want to miss what this note sets into motion. She folded the paper slowly, her heart beating faster now, and slipped it into her apron pocket, unaware that a simple choice made in a nearly empty restaurant was about to pull her into something far bigger than a missed tip. And whatever waited on the other side of that folded page, she could already feel it wasn't going to be easy to walk away from. Henry Caldwell had chosen the corner booth for a reason. From there, he could see the entire restaurant without being seen too much himself. The entrance, the bar, the narrow path servers took back and forth, balancing plates in exhaustion. It was a habit he'd picked up over years of meetings and quiet negotiations. Always sit where you can observe before you're observed. The Willow wasn't his usual place. Too small. Too intimate. He normally ate at restaurants where no one asked questions, where the staff was trained to be invisible and efficient. Tonight, though, he'd found himself turning down a familiar street and parking without fully deciding to. The first thing he noticed when he sat down wasn't the menu. It was her. Not because she was loud or dramatic. Quite the opposite. She moved with an economy of motion that suggested she didn't waste energy on unnecessary things. Every step had purpose. Every gesture was controlled. She smiled often, but it wasn't the empty kind meant to earn tips. It was the kind that came from habit, like muscle memory formed by years of needing to appear okay. Henry watched her without realizing he was doing it. She laughed softly at something a customer said, head tilting just slightly, then straightened again as she carried 2 plates at once. There was a faint limp when she thought no one was looking. He caught it because he was trained to notice small details. In business they mattered. In people, he'd learned not to care. Yet here he was. Henry picked at his food, appetite half present. His phone buzzed twice with emails he didn't open. A deal in Vancouver was unraveling. A board member wanted reassurance. Another wanted blood. Normally, this was the part of the evening where he'd feel sharp, focused, in control. Instead, he felt tired. Not the kind of tired sleep fixed. The deeper kind. The kind that settled behind your eyes when you realized you'd built a life that worked perfectly on paper but didn't feel like much when the noise stopped. He watched the waitress, Janelle, he'd learned from the name stitched on her apron, wipe down a table with care that felt personal. Like she respected the space even though it wasn't hers. It bothered him more than it should have. He told himself it was nothing. That he was projecting. That everyone looked meaningful if you stared long enough. Still, when she came by to check on him, he felt the urge to say something unscripted. Something human. He didn't. He asked for the check instead. As she walked away, Henry leaned back, staring at the flicker of the candle in front of him. His thoughts drifted somewhere he usually avoided. To a cramped kitchen in Cleveland. To his mother standing at the sink late at night, rubbing her wrists after a double shift. To the way she'd smiled anyway when he complained about homework or dinner. She'd had that same look Janelle wore. The look of someone carrying weight quietly. Henry shook his head slightly, annoyed with himself. Nostalgia was dangerous. Sentimentality even more so. He'd learned early that feelings didn't pay bills. Control did. When the check arrived, he paid without hesitation. Exact change. Habit again. Tips complicated things. Tips implied gratitude, and gratitude created expectations. He stood, slipping on his jacket, and hesitated. This was the moment he'd walk out. Forget the whole thing. Another dinner. Another anonymous night. Instead, he reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper he'd been carrying for weeks. He didn't know why it was still there. He'd written on it during a long flight, intending to throw it away. He unfolded it, glanced at the words, then wrote her name at the top. He didn't sign it fully. Just an initial. When he left the note beneath the plate, he felt something unfamiliar twist in his chest. Doubt maybe. Or curiosity. Outside the air was cool. Quiet. The city hummed at a distance. Henry walked to his car and sat there for a moment without starting the engine. He told himself he'd gone too far. That this was inappropriate. Reckless even. But as he finally drove away, he couldn't shake the certainty that the waitress in the small bistro was standing at a crossroads she didn't know existed yet. And if she chose to read what he'd left behind, there would be no simple way back for either of them. Janelle sat on the edge of the last booth, the folded note clutched in her hand like a fragile secret. The restaurant had emptied out, leaving only the hum of the dishwasher and the soft jazz that seemed to mourn the passing of the evening. Her apron smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and fried chicken grease, and the ache in her feet had deepened to a dull throb she couldn't ignore. She stared at the paper, her fingers curling around it. The handwriting was precise, careful, almost deliberate, the kind that made her wonder if the person behind it ever rushed at all. Janelle. Just her name on the top and then a few lines that made her pulse quicken. Who even does this? She whispered to herself. Her voice sounded foreign in the empty room. A stranger. A billionaire stranger. Leaves a note. Under a plate. Her rational mind screamed at her. Don't go. Throw it away. Ignore it. But another part, the part that had spent every waking moment juggling bills, hospital appointments, and school assignments, curled tight inside her chest. Curiosity, tinged with something she refused to name, prickled at her. She slid the note out of the apron pocket and read it again. I know the world sees me as cold. But you, Janelle, are proof that some warmth survives. Meet me at the address below. I want to understand why you carry so much, yet never break. Her stomach nodded. The address was written at the bottom, a quiet street in a neighborhood she'd never visited. It felt deliberate, like an invitation she wasn't sure she wanted but somehow needed. Janelle leaned back against the booth, staring at the ceiling. The fluorescent lights hummed softly. She could hear the dishwasher finish its cycle and the occasional scraping of chairs from the back. Her heartbeat seemed loud against it all. Am I crazy? She muttered. She knew her life could change in a second if she walked out that door. She could meet this man, answer his questions, maybe even find herself in a situation she wasn't prepared for. Or she could ignore the note and go home, her brother asleep, her mother tired, everything normal in the way they had learned to make it. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, expecting her mother or Trey. Nothing. Just a message from herself. Reminder to take out the trash. Even the mundane felt heavy now, heavy with the weight of this choice. She folded the note carefully and slipped it into her apron pocket again. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel a tiny spark of excitement. Fear wrapped around it, sure, but the spark was there. Janelle stood slowly, stretching her arms over her head. The restaurant smelled like lemon and old breadcrumbs. She wiped her hands on her apron and glanced toward the door, imagining the night outside, the empty street, the distant cars, the hum of street lights against the dark sky. You've got to be kidding me, she whispered, mostly to herself. Then she paused. Her reflection in the glass behind the bar caught her eye. Determination. Or maybe stubbornness. She couldn't tell the difference anymore. She knew she'd have to make a choice soon. Stay safe in the life she knew, or step into something unknown that could turn everything upside down. Before she could decide, a server from another section passed by, asking if she was closing up. Janelle nodded absently, tucking the note deeper into her apron pocket. The thought lingered as she finally left the restaurant. What if this note wasn't just curiosity? What if it was the first thread of something bigger? Something that might change more than just tonight? She walked to her car slowly, the cool night air brushing against her face. Her mind raced, every what-if colliding with another. She started the engine but didn't move immediately. The city was quiet, save for the distant hum of tires on asphalt. And somewhere, far from her small apartment, a man had already left her life with only a plate and a folded piece of paper, never imagining how it would reach inside her, unsettle her, or pull her toward a future she didn't yet understand. Janelle shook her head. Okay. Tomorrow, she said to herself. Tomorrow I'll see what this is all about. But as the engine idled and her fingers drummed nervously on the wheel, she couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow had already begun. And she wasn't ready for what she might find there. Janelle woke to the shrill beep of her alarm, a sound she normally hated but somehow felt necessary today. The note from last night still burned a faint trail in her thoughts, like a whisper she couldn't ignore. She sat up in bed, staring at the ceiling of her small apartment, listening to the soft hum of the city outside her window. Trey's alarm hadn't gone off yet, which meant he was probably still buried under his blankets, trying to escape the world like she sometimes wished she could. She rubbed her temples, the lingering ache from last night's shift gnawing at her. Her apartment was quiet, too quiet, except for the distant sound of traffic below and the occasional siren that reminded her life was still moving, whether she was ready for it or not. Her mother was already at work, juggling 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. Bills stacked neatly in one corner of the kitchen, unpaid but organized, like they were a puzzle waiting for her to solve. Janelle's fingers brushed over the folded note tucked inside her apron from the night before. She pulled it out, smoothing the paper with care. The handwriting seemed impossibly neat, almost formal. Her name at the top, the words underneath carrying a weight she couldn't fully understand yet. She read it again as if each line might reveal a hidden meaning she missed the first time. I know the world sees me as cold. But you, Janelle, are proof that some warmth survives. Meet me at the address below. I want to understand why you carry so much, yet never break. Her stomach twisted. Who was this man? Why her? And why did it feel like a door had opened in her chest that she wasn't ready to step through? Breakfast was quiet. Trey shuffled into the kitchen in pajamas, rubbing his eyes. Morning, Janelle, he mumbled. You're up early. Yeah, she said softly, forcing a smile she didn't quite feel. Just stuff to do. He barely looked at her, grabbing a slice of toast and retreating back to his room. She watched him go and felt the familiar pang of helplessness that had followed her for years. Bills, medicine, rent, and now some stranger who had left a note promising to understand her. By mid-morning she found herself pacing her small living room, the note clutched in her hand like a lifeline. Her rational mind argued endlessly, don't go. It's strange. You don't even know him. But a quieter, insistent voice pressed on her, the one that had learned to survive on instinct as much as logic. Her curiosity won. She pulled on a simple jacket, checked her reflection in the mirror and grabbed her keys. The city streets were busier now, cars honking and cyclists weaving through traffic. She drove with the note on the passenger seat, staring at it whenever she could, trying to guess the person behind it. The address wasn't far, tucked into a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets and houses that looked calm in the morning light. When she arrived, she hesitated. The street was empty, almost too perfect, too peaceful. A soft wind rustled the leaves along the sidewalk. She gripped the note tightly, trying to steady herself. The house in front of her was understated but elegant. Neutral tones, a small garden in front, a single oak tree casting long shadows across the driveway. Her fingers shook slightly as she pressed the doorbell. The chime echoed softly inside, followed by the sound of footsteps approaching. She swallowed hard, her pulse quickening, and forced herself to stand tall. The door opened. Henry Caldwell appeared, casually dressed, without the suit she had seen him in at the Willow. He looked almost human. Warm, though there was still a faint edge of formality, a careful guard around his expression. Janelle, he said simply. No flourish, no dramatics. Just her name, spoken aloud, carrying weight. She nodded, unable to find words at first. He stepped aside, gesturing her in. The interior of the house was quieter than she expected. Tasteful, organized, but lived in, like someone who knew comfort mattered but wasn't trying to impress anyone. They sat in the living room, the faint scent of tea and polished wood in the air. Henry poured a cup for himself and then offered her one. She accepted, fingers brushing the rim nervously. For a long moment, neither spoke. The quiet was almost unbearable, filled with unspoken questions and possibilities. Finally, Henry broke the silence. I watched you last night, he admitted, almost whispering. Not in a creepy way. I just noticed how you handled yourself. How you move through the world even when it's heavy. Even when you're tired. Janelle's lips pressed together. Why would that matter to you? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, studying her as if measuring whether he could be honest. Because most people don't see that, he said finally. Most people only see the surface. You carry more than anyone should. And you do it quietly. The words hit her harder than she expected. She shifted in her seat, the warmth of the tea doing little to calm the nervous flutter in her chest. What do you want from me? she asked, voice low, careful. Henry hesitated. I don't know yet, he admitted. I thought, maybe I wanted to understand. Maybe I thought you'd help me remember what it feels like to care. Janelle blinked, trying not to show how much that rattled her. She had been cautious her whole life. This man, stranger or not, was pushing into something personal she wasn't sure she wanted to share. She took a slow sip of her tea, feeling it warm her hands and her nerves at the same time. The house was quiet except for the faint ticking of a clock on the mantel. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. For the first time in a long while, Janelle felt that everything she thought she knew about the night, about the note, and about the man who had left it, might not be enough. Something was about to change. And she wasn't sure she was ready. Janelle shifted in the chair, the warm mug of tea between her hands doing little to steady the flutter in her chest. Henry sat across from her, the afternoon light spilling through the blinds, casting thin stripes over the polished floor. There was an odd familiarity in the quiet, as if she had stepped into a world where time slowed down, but not in a comforting way. In a way that made her pulse quicken. You're quiet, he said finally. His voice wasn't harsh or impatient. Just attentive, as if he was trying to listen to her thoughts before she even spoke them. I don't usually talk to strangers who leave notes under plates, Janelle replied, trying to sound casual but failing. Her hands tightened around the mug. The heat from the tea was grounding, but only just. Henry leaned back, studying her. Fair enough. I suppose that's not exactly normal. She didn't answer immediately, which was probably what he expected. She studied him instead. Not the billionaire in the suit from the restaurant. The man sitting in his own living room, slippers hidden beneath the table, hair slightly mussed. Someone human. Vulnerable. What do you want to know? She asked after a pause, her voice quieter this time, almost hesitant. Henry's gaze lingered on her, thoughtful. Everything. Or enough. About why you keep moving forward even when life's pressing down. About why you don't break. And maybe, he trailed off, shaking his head. Maybe just about who you are beneath it all. Janelle blinked. Why me? I'm not special. I'm just surviving. Henry shook his head slowly. No, you're doing more than surviving. Most people would have crumbled under what you carry. I noticed it last night. You've got this quiet strength. And I can't explain why, but it mattered to me. She swallowed hard. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. Her mother had praised her teachers had praised her occasionally, but this stranger, this billionaire, was seeing the weight she carried and acknowledging it. Recognizing it. She hesitated, unsure what to say. I just do what I have to. That's all. Henry nodded, a faint smile breaking the careful neutrality he usually wore. I get that. But sometimes, it's hard to notice that people like you exist. And I wanted to. The words hung in the air, heavy but not uncomfortable. Janelle shifted, trying to put her emotions in check. Something about him made her want to trust him even though she knew better. She had been cautious her whole life for a reason. Do you always write notes to strangers? She asked, a small edge of sarcasm hiding her nerves. Henry chuckled softly, a sound that startled her. It was light, almost self-deprecating. No, not usually. You're different. Janelle's eyebrows rose. Different how? He paused. Different enough that I wanted to reach out. Different enough that I'm not entirely sure why I did, but I had to. The conversation drifted after that. Small talk at first. Questions about her job at the Willow, about Trey, her mother. She answered lightly at first, carefully choosing what to share and what to withhold. But there was something about his patience that made her open up a little more than she intended. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. She laughed softly at a dry joke he made about the chaos of business meetings. She winced slightly when he asked about her family, feeling the weight of how exposed she was. And yet she stayed. She drank her tea, letting it warm her, while the sunlight faded slowly outside the blinds. And then, just as she thought the visit might end quietly, Henry leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I know this is sudden. I know it's weird. But I want you to know something. Janelle tensed. What? He looked her in the eyes, and for the first time she saw it, honesty raw and unguarded, peeking through the polished exterior. I've been watching the world too long from the outside. I've measured everything by numbers, by deals, by outcomes. I forgot what it feels like to notice people for who they are, not what they represent. And you reminded me. The weight of his words settled on her like a stone. She wanted to pull away, to say it wasn't necessary, but something held her in place. A quiet sound came from the hall, a mail slot rattling or a neighbor moving past the door. Janelle's eyes flicked toward the window, then back. Henry's expression softened. I didn't expect this either. But sometimes the smallest gestures, like a note under a plate, can ripple into unexpected places. Her heart thumped in her chest. Something told her this meeting wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. And just as she reached for her jacket to leave, she noticed something on the coffee table. A small envelope, plain and unmarked, just sitting there as if it had been waiting for her all along. She picked it up, and in that instant, a chill ran down her spine. Whatever was inside that envelope would change everything she thought she knew about this encounter. Janelle's hands trembled slightly as she held the small envelope. It wasn't the kind of envelope that demanded attention. It was plain, unassuming, but the weight of its presence made her stomach twist in knots. She glanced at Henry, who sat back in his chair, eyes calm as if he were giving her space to process, to decide what to do. Her mind raced. What is this? Another note? Money? Some kind of trick? She took a deep breath and slowly opened it. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. Her name was written on it again in the same neat handwriting. She unfolded it carefully, her pulse quickening with every movement. I want to help, but I need you to trust me. Let me show you what's possible. Meet me tomorrow afternoon at the clinic I've arranged for your brother. Janelle's eyes widened. Her heart skipped a beat. She recognized the clinic immediately. It was the one Trey had been on the waiting list for, the one she had been praying for silently for months. How did you? She started, but her words faltered. She looked up at Henry, who was watching her intently. I noticed, he said simply, almost too quietly. I know things. I pay attention. Her chest tightened. She felt relief and disbelief at the same time. She had never mentioned Trey's medical struggles to anyone outside her family. Not coworkers, not friends, not even neighbors. And yet, this stranger, this man she barely knew, had somehow arranged access to the care her brother needed. It's too much, she whispered. I don't even know how to thank you. I can't believe this. Henry shrugged, though his eyes betrayed a rare vulnerability. You don't have to thank me. I just wanted to help. I didn't know how else to reach you. Janelle's fingers gripped the envelope tighter. Part of her wanted to burst into tears. Another part wanted to step back and question everything. Why me? Why like this? The room was quiet except for the soft ticking of the clock on the mantel. Outside, the sunlight slanted through the blinds, casting long shadows across the floor. The moment felt surreal, like a scene in a movie she wasn't sure she had been cast for. I don't know what to say, she admitted, voice barely audible. You don't have to say anything, Henry replied. Just, let me show you that someone notices. That someone can help. Janelle nodded slowly, trying to steady her racing thoughts. Her mind jumped ahead to Trey, his smile, his soft laugh, his excitement when he finally got access to care he needed. The thought made her chest ache in a mix of hope and lingering fear. But as much as relief washed over her, a seed of doubt remained. She had never trusted strangers. Never someone with so much power. What does he want in return? The question whispered in the back of her mind, quiet but persistent. She took a deep breath, folding the note and tucking it carefully into her pocket. Okay, she said finally. I'll go. I'll see the clinic. Tomorrow. Henry's eyes softened. Good. Just know that you're not alone in this. You don't have to carry it all by yourself. For a moment, Janelle allowed herself to believe it. A small flicker of hope ignited, fragile but undeniable. Then as she reached for the door to leave, she paused. Her instincts, honed from years of vigilance, whispered caution. She glanced back at Henry, unsure if the next steps would bring safety, or something far more complicated. She stepped outside into the afternoon light, the envelope heavy in her pocket. The wind rustled through the trees along the quiet street, brushing against her face. It felt like the world was holding its breath with her, waiting for the choice she was about to make. And she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever happened next, at the clinic, in her life, in the life of her brother, would change everything she thought she knew about strangers, trust, and the unexpected ways people could enter your world. Her heart pounded as she walked to her car, the note a constant reminder that the ordinary rules of her life were shifting. One small paper, one simple invitation had opened a door. And the question now wasn't if she would walk through it, but what she would find on the other side. Henry Caldwell sat alone in his study long after Janelle's car disappeared down the street. The house had returned to its usual quiet, the kind that pressed in on him when there was nothing left to distract him. No calls. No assistants hovering. No meetings demanding decisions. Just the low tick of the clock on the wall and the faint whir of the refrigerator somewhere down the hall. He loosened his collar and leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling as if it might offer answers. He hadn't planned for any of this. The note, the meeting, the envelope. None of it had been part of a strategy. Henry prided himself on precision, on control, on knowing the outcome before he ever made a move. What he'd done with Janelle felt reckless, emotional, sloppy even. And yet, when he replayed the moment she'd read the note, the way her hands had trembled just slightly, he didn't regret it. What unsettled him was how much he felt it. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet neighborhood. Everything here was paid for. Predictable. Safe. A far cry from the place he'd grown up in, where safety was something you improvised and predictability was a luxury. Cleveland, Ohio. A cramped apartment above a laundromat. His mother coming home late, shoes in hand so she wouldn't wake him. Her wrists swollen from repetitive work. Her smile always ready anyway. She'd carried herself the same way Janelle did. That realization had hit him hard the night before at the Willow. Henry hadn't gone there looking for redemption or connection. He'd gone there because he was tired and didn't want to eat alone in a hotel restaurant again. He'd noticed Janelle the way he noticed patterns and numbers, subtle shifts, small tells. The way she favored one foot. The way her smile appeared only after customers spoke, never before. The way she checked her phone and didn't answer it. People who had nothing pressing didn't move like that. After he left the restaurant, he'd sat in his car longer than he meant to, replaying the scene in his head. He told himself he was projecting, that it was nostalgia clouding his judgment. But curiosity had always been his weakness. Back in his study, Henry opened the desk drawer and pulled out a thin folder. Inside were papers neatly organized, clipped, annotated. He stared at it for a long moment before opening it. Janelle Brooks. He hadn't started with her name. He'd started with the restaurant. A quiet inquiry. Public information. Employment records that weren't hard to access if you knew where to look. From there, threads had unraveled naturally. A single mother listed as next of kin on a medical intake form. A younger sibling with ongoing treatment delays. Insurance gaps. Appeals denied. None of it had been illegal. None of it had required favors he couldn't call in quietly. Still, he felt a tightening in his chest as he flipped through the pages. "I should have told you," he muttered to the empty room. Henry wasn't blind to the power imbalance. He knew exactly what it meant to step into someone's life like that, armed with resources they didn't have. He told himself he was helping, that the outcome justified the means. But if he was honest, truly honest, part of him wanted to be needed. That was harder to admit. He closed the folder and set it aside, rubbing his temples. The board meeting tomorrow loomed in his mind, but it felt distant now. Trivial. A familiar distraction. Janelle's face replaced the spreadsheets in his thoughts. The way her guard had stayed up even as hope flickered behind her eyes. The way she hadn't thanked him immediately. That, more than anything, had earned his respect. Most people would have gushed. Asked for more. Leaned in too fast. She hadn't. Henry exhaled slowly. The clinic appointment was real. Confirmed. Paid for discreetly. No strings attached, at least not the kind he was used to attaching. He wanted to prove something to himself as much as to her. That he could intervene without controlling. that he could help without owning the outcome. Still, doubt crept in. What if she saw this as manipulation? What if she walked away tomorrow and never came back? The thought unsettled him more than he expected. Henry glanced at the clock. Late afternoon. She would be driving home now, the envelope heavy in her pocket, questions piling up faster than answers. He picked up his phone, then set it down again without unlocking it. No. He'd already crossed enough lines for one day. Let her decide. As evening settled over the house, Henry realized something that made his chest tighten in a way money never had. For the first time in years, the next move wasn't his to make. And whether Janelle showed up at that clinic tomorrow or not would determine far more than a medical appointment. It would decide how much of his carefully controlled world he was about to lose, or finally let go of. Janelle couldn't sleep that night. The note, the envelope, the strange pull of Henry's invitation. Everything buzzed in her mind like electricity through wires she hadn't touched in years. She lay in her small bedroom, the ceiling fan whirring lazily above her, but her thoughts refused to slow. She thought about Trey first. His soft laugh in the morning. The way he'd frown when he couldn't reach a book on the shelf. His persistent hope even when the world often ignored him. The clinic Henry had mentioned was the one she'd been chasing, the one she had hoped for but never expected to actually reach. Her stomach twisted with a mixture of hope and fear. "What am I doing?" she whispered to herself. Her voice sounded small in the dark room, almost swallowed by the quiet hum of the apartment. The rational part of her brain screamed warnings. "You barely know him. What does he really want? It's a trap. He's a billionaire, you're just, you." But the other part, the part that had survived years of struggle, carrying more weight than anyone should, pressed harder. "He can help. Trey can get the care he needs." You could finally breathe for a moment. Janelle sat up, swinging her legs over the side of the bed. She glanced at the envelope still resting on her nightstand, folded neatly. Her fingers itched to touch it, to confirm it was real. She picked it up, tracing the neat handwriting with a fingertip, feeling the faint grooves in the ink. The hours passed slowly. She tried to sleep, tried to convince herself she could wait until morning, but the anticipation gnawed at her. She rehearsed every possible scenario in her head. What if Henry had made a mistake? What if the clinic appointment wasn't real? What if she stepped into something she couldn't step out of? By dawn she had decided. She wouldn't sleep any longer worrying. She needed to act. The morning air was crisp as she stepped outside, carrying her small bag with essentials and the envelope tucked safely inside her jacket. The city felt quieter than usual, as though it too was holding its breath, waiting for what she was about to do. Cars passed by lazily, and the smell of fresh bread from the bakery around the corner drifted through the air, oddly comforting against the tension coiling in her stomach. Driving to the clinic, Janelle kept her eyes mostly on the road, though her thoughts raced ahead. She wondered what Henry would be like there. Would he be the calm, composed man from the restaurant? Or the more human, quiet version she had glimpsed in his living room? The address was tucked into a quiet neighborhood, not flashy, not intimidating. She parked a few streets away, walking the final blocks, each step making her feel both anxious and exhilarated. The clinic looked professional but welcoming, a building that promised care without pomp. Inside, she was met with efficiency that was reassuring. Her name had been pre-registered. The forms were ready. No awkward delays. Everything was already in motion. She leaned against the counter, taking a moment to breathe, when a familiar voice called softly from behind. "Janelle." She turned and there he was. Henry. Not in a suit. Not a boardroom mask. Just himself, quiet, approachable, but still carrying that subtle weight of authority that made her wary. "You made it," he said, offering a small tentative smile. I didn't know if I would," she admitted, the words barely escaping her lips. Her heart still thumped like a drum in her chest. Henry nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I know. That's why I'm glad you did." They walked through the clinic together. Each step felt heavier than it should, weighted with anticipation and unspoken questions. As they entered the waiting area, Trey appeared, sitting quietly in one of the chairs. The boy's eyes widened when he saw Janelle, and then softened when he saw Henry. "Is this real?" she whispered to Henry, not wanting to speak too loudly in the room. Henry's expression was steady. "It's real," he confirmed. "All of it. I arranged it. You didn't have to do anything but come here today." A small, incredulous laugh escaped her. I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he said again, his tone soft but certain. "Just let it happen." The weight in Janelle's chest began to lift, a fragile, trembling hope taking its place. But even as relief washed over her, a quiet unease lingered in the back of her mind. She knew life rarely unfolded this smoothly. Something told her that this moment, this fragile hope, was just the beginning of something much larger, something she wasn't fully ready to understand. As they waited for Trey's name to be called, Janelle looked at Henry. He was watching her, patient, measured, but there was a tension there too, subtle and human. Something told her that he, too, was about to learn that even the best intentions could carry unexpected consequences. And in that quiet, waiting room, surrounded by the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant murmur of voices, Janelle realized that whatever was about to happen next could change more than just her brother's future. Could change everything. Trey's name was called before Janelle could fully steady herself. Her stomach tightened as she followed the nurse down the narrow hallway, her hand brushing lightly against Trey's shoulder. The boy walked quietly beside her, eyes wide and curious, as if he didn't quite understand how he had suddenly landed here, in this new bright place full of clean walls and calm voices. Henry followed a few steps behind, his presence steady but unobtrusive. Janelle kept sneaking glances at him, noticing the small things, the way he carried himself without rushing, the faint crease in his brow, the soft patience in his eyes. He was powerful, yes, but there was something else there too, a careful attentiveness that made her cautious hope feel almost real. The room they entered smelled faintly of antiseptic and warmth, like safety and control blended together. Trey climbed onto the examination table, fidgeting with the edge of his sleeve. Janelle took a deep breath and smoothed his hair back gently. "Hey," she said softly. "It's okay. Everything's going to be okay." He nodded, eyes shining slightly. "It feels different," he whispered, voice small. "It is," Janelle admitted. "And it's going to help you, I promise." Henry stood by the door, silent, watching. Janelle caught his gaze and nodded briefly. He gave a subtle smile, almost imperceptible, before stepping back. It was clear he was letting her take the lead. The doctor arrived, introducing herself warmly and quickly putting Trey at ease. As the evaluation began, Janelle noticed the tension easing from her brother's shoulders. The nurse explained the procedures, the schedule, and the next steps, and everything that had felt out of reach was suddenly within their grasp. Janelle's chest swelled with relief, but a small knot of anxiety remained. She knew better than to assume everything would be simple. Life had a habit of complicating even the best laid plans. After the checkup, Trey climbed down from the table and hugged Janelle tightly. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice muffled against her shoulder. She held him close for a moment longer than necessary, breathing in his small, nervous energy. "You're welcome," she said softly. Henry cleared his throat from the doorway and Janelle turned to him. I don't even know how to thank you," she said, voice shaking slightly. "You don't need to," he replied. "Just make sure he's taken care of. That's enough for me." Janelle's eyes flicked to him, searching for something deeper, a hidden motive perhaps, but found only quiet sincerity. It unsettled her in ways she couldn't yet articulate. As they walked out of the clinic, Trey skipping ahead slightly, Janelle felt a strange mix of exhilaration and unease. Everything had gone smoothly, far smoother than she could have imagined, and yet the envelope, the note, and Henry's presence all hinted that this was only the beginning. She glanced at him again. "Why me?" she asked, her voice low. Henry's gaze softened, thoughtful. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "Maybe because you're the kind of person the world often misses. Maybe because I wanted to remember what it feels like to see someone who carries more than they should and still keeps moving forward." Janelle didn't know how to respond. She wanted to be grateful, cautious, skeptical, all at once. The truth was, she felt like she was standing on the edge of something enormous, something she couldn't yet name or predict. As they left the clinic, the city streets hummed around them, ordinary and familiar yet suddenly charged with possibility. Trey held her hand tightly, unaware of the ripple this day would create in all their lives. Henry walked beside her, silent now, letting her carry the lead. But Janelle couldn't shake the feeling that he had carefully orchestrated more than just this visit. Something in the quiet determination of his presence suggested that the story he had begun with the note under the plate was far from over. And as they drove back through the city, Janelle realized that life, even when it feels ordinary, has a way of bending in unexpected directions. Sometimes in ways you can't yet see but can already feel deep in your chest. The envelope, the note, and Henry's quiet watchfulness were just the start. Something bigger was coming. Janelle couldn't shake the feeling that the day's events were only a prelude to something bigger. The clinic visit had gone better than she dared hope, yet the quiet tension she felt in Henry's presence refused to fade. They returned to his house in near silence. Trey was unusually subdued, staring out the window at the passing streets, his small fingers gripping Janelle's hand as if the world might shift beneath them at any moment. She sensed he felt it too, that this day, this man, this stranger was not something ordinary. Henry walked behind them into the living room, removing his coat slowly, methodically. "Sit," he said gently, gesturing toward the sofa. "I want to explain something before it gets out of hand." Janelle sank into the cushions cautiously, Trey beside her. She felt the envelope still heavy in her pocket, a reminder that whatever had been set in motion today was far from over. Henry pulled a chair close and leaned forward, hands clasped. His expression was unguarded now, though there was a tension in his jaw, a quiet weight she hadn't noticed before. "I know what you're thinking," he began, voice low, steady. "Why me? Why this? Why now?" "I'm thinking it's too much," Janelle admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "It's like you already know things you shouldn't. My brother, my mom, my life. And I don't even know why you care." He nodded slowly. "I don't expect you to understand yet, but there's a reason I reached out. Not just the clinic. Not just today. I've been observing quietly for some time." Janelle's stomach dropped. "Observing? How long? And what did that even mean?" Henry took a breath. "I saw your strength first. Then I saw the struggles you've carried alone. I wanted to help without making it about me. Without making it transactional. But," his eyes flicked toward Trey, then back at her. "Helping is never just about resources. It's about timing and trust and knowing when to step in. I miscalculated the balance of those things with you." Janelle's brow furrowed. "You mean, you miscalculated? So this, everything, isn't exactly what it seems?" He shook his head. "It's what it seems, but the timing is delicate. And the truth is, I misjudged how much you'd trust someone like me. How much you'd allow someone into your life without fear." She pressed her lips together, trying to sort through her emotions. Relief, gratitude, skepticism, fear. All tangled together in a tight knot she couldn't untangle. Henry leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I also need you to know, this isn't about a single act of kindness. The note, the envelope, the clinic, those were all steps. I wanted to see if you'd let yourself accept help, even when it's unexpected. I wanted to understand you, not just your circumstances." Janelle blinked. "Understand me? You barely know me. You don't know what it's like to carry this life on your shoulders." "Maybe not," he admitted. "But I know what it's like to watch life pass by while being trapped in a cage you built yourself. And I wanted to see if you'd let someone help dismantle parts of that cage without breaking you." She stared at him, heart racing, trying to absorb the weight of his words. Part of her wanted to recoil. This was too much. Too invasive. Too fast. But another part, the part that had survived years of quiet struggle, whispered that maybe she didn't have to carry everything alone. And then, just as she began to consider that possibility, Henry reached into a drawer and pulled out a small folder. He placed it on the table in front of her. Janelle's eyes widened. She recognized it immediately. It contained information about her family, her struggles, the things she had kept private, the things she had fought to handle on her own. "This," he said quietly, "is why I left the note under the plate. Not to frighten you. Not to manipulate. But because I needed you to see that someone noticed. That someone could act. That someone could care." Her fingers hovered above the folder. A rush of conflicting emotions hit her at once. Fear, anger, disbelief, gratitude. How much did he really know? How far had he gone to reach into her life? Henry leaned forward, voice soft but urgent. "I understand if this is too much. I understand if you walk away. But I need you to know the truth. I only did this because I thought you deserved it. And I want to help, truly, not as a favor, not as a transaction, but because it's the right thing to do." Janelle's chest tightened. The room felt impossibly still, charged with the tension of unspoken questions and decisions that could change everything. And in that moment she realized something she hadn't expected. The world she thought she knew, the one she had fought to control, protect, and survive, was shifting beneath her feet. The first major plot twist had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. Janelle sat back in the chair, her fingers nervously twisting the edge of her jacket. The folder still lay on the table, a quiet testament to the fact that Henry had indeed gone further than she could have imagined. Every piece of information, her family, her struggles, Trey's medical records, was there, meticulously compiled. The magnitude of it made her stomach tighten. "Why didn't you just call?" she asked finally, her voice low. She wasn't angry, at least not fully, but the words carried the weight of disbelief. Henry shrugged slightly, though his eyes held an intensity she couldn't ignore. "Because I didn't want to just intrude. I wanted to see if you'd let me in on your terms. I didn't want to start with words. I wanted to start with action." Janelle blinked, absorbing the idea. Start with action. That was both comforting and unsettling. Someone who acted instead of talking. It sounded kind, even generous. But it was also intrusive, a reminder that Henry's reach extended far beyond what she was comfortable with. She looked down at Trey, who was quietly leafing through a magazine. The boy was unusually calm, his trust in her radiating quietly. Somehow, seeing him like this gave her courage. I don't know if I should feel grateful or scared," she admitted. Her voice wavered. "I don't know how to process any of this." Henry leaned back, letting a moment of silence settle between them. He didn't push, didn't explain further. The quiet itself spoke volumes. Finally he said, "You're allowed to feel both. And anything else. You don't have to apologize for your feelings." She considered that, letting his words sink in. For years she had carried her emotions in a tight, controlled bundle, showing only what she thought was safe. And here was someone telling her it was okay to feel fully, messy, and unpolished. Slowly, Janelle allowed herself to look at him differently, not the billionaire from the restaurant, not the man with the mysterious note, but a person who seemed to see her fully, without judgment, without expectation. "You actually notice things," she said quietly. "Things no one else sees." Henry's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "I notice what matters. Most people get distracted by the noise." A quiet tension lingered in the room, soft but undeniable. Janelle felt herself relaxing just slightly, the walls she had built around her heart cracking in tiny, careful lines. But even as she allowed herself to trust even a little, there was a persistent awareness that this connection was complicated. Dangerous, even in ways she didn't yet understand. Trey spoke suddenly, his small voice breaking the delicate balance of silence. "Mom, are we going to be okay now?" Janelle's heart ached. She reached down, brushing her fingers through his hair. "Yes, baby. For now we're okay." Henry's gaze softened as he watched them, but there was an unmistakable gravity in his eyes. He had given them access to care, yes, but he also knew that trust wasn't given lightly. And that sometimes the smallest gestures, like an envelope under a plate, could have repercussions neither party fully anticipated. Janelle took a deep breath, letting the warmth of the room and the quiet presence of Henry settle around her. Slowly, cautiously, she began to feel something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time: hope. But it was tempered by wariness, because she knew that life had a way of testing even the most carefully constructed moments of calm. And somewhere in the quiet, she realized that this was only the beginning. The first ripple had been sent out. And the waves were already forming, moving toward places she could not yet see. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the blinds of Janelle's apartment, but she hardly noticed it. Her thoughts were elsewhere, on Henry, the envelope, the clinic, and the strange, unshakable pull that seemed to follow her since the night of the note. She had expected life to return to normal, but instead, everything felt sharper, more urgent, like a quiet storm had settled over her. Trey was already up, quietly eating cereal at the small kitchen table. He looked at her expectantly. Mom, do you think this can last? The clinic, will it really work? Janelle knelt beside him, brushing his hair back. We'll see, baby. But for now we have a chance. That's all we can ask for. She tried to sound certain, though doubt flickered beneath the surface. After dropping Trey off at school, Janelle's mind drifted to Henry. She couldn't explain why, but the thought of him was a constant presence. Not the intimidating billionaire from the Willow, but the quiet, careful man who had watched, who had acted, who had respected boundaries while simultaneously bending them in ways that made her uneasy and strangely grateful. She arrived at work at the Willow, the clatter of plates and the low hum of conversation filling the air. The usual chaos of a busy lunch shift seemed almost comforting in its predictability, yet she couldn't escape the memory of the folder, of Henry leaning forward in his chair, quietly explaining the magnitude of what he had done for her family. "Morning, Janelle," called out one of her co-workers, snapping her back to reality. She smiled faintly, nodding. Her movements were automatic: pour coffee, check tables, greet customers, but her mind lingered on the subtle ways her life was changing without her permission. During a brief lull, she slipped into the back room to catch her breath. That's when her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "If you have a moment, there's something I need to show you. Come to the office building downtown. 2 p.m. Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected contact outside the clinic, outside the envelope. Her rational mind warned her, be careful. You barely know him. This could be a trap. But another part, the part that had survived years of struggle, that had learned to trust actions more than words, urged her forward. This is Henry. He's not just a stranger. He's someone who notices, someone who can act. By mid-afternoon, she found herself standing outside a sleek office building, the glass doors reflecting the bustling city around her. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. She hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open. Henry was waiting inside, unassuming yet deliberate, as if he had been expecting her every step of the way. He motioned for her to follow him into an empty conference room. "Why here?" she asked softly, scanning the minimalistic space. "I wanted privacy," he said, his tone calm but edged with urgency. "I wanted to show you something that might help you understand why I do what I do." Her curiosity was piqued despite her caution. She followed him to a large monitor at the front of the room. Henry tapped a few keys and a series of images and documents appeared. Charts, schedules, medical notes, even maps of local resources. Everything was organized, annotated, precise. "This is everything I've gathered to help you and Trey," Henry explained. "Not just today, not just the clinic, but the long term. Resources, connections, schedules. I want to make sure you're never stuck again." Janelle's breath caught. The level of detail, the meticulous care, it was overwhelming. "You did all this? Without asking me?" "Yes," Henry said simply. "I needed to see if you'd let yourself accept it. And now you're here, seeing it. You've taken the first step toward trusting, toward letting someone in." Her chest tightened, not with gratitude alone, but with a quiet, rising tension. This wasn't just help. This was immersion. A doorway into a world she hadn't asked for, with consequences she couldn't yet predict. She looked at him, voice barely a whisper. "And if I say no? If I step back?" Henry's eyes softened, but there was a weight behind them, an honesty she couldn't ignore. "Then I respect that. But you'll know it's available if you need it. That's all I ask." Janelle nodded slowly, unsure whether relief or fear held her tighter. The offer, the invitation, the carefully laid plans, they were all real. And yet, the line between assistance and control felt thinner than she had ever imagined. As she left the office building, the city streets buzzing around her, she felt the first true tremors of uncertainty. Trust was a delicate thing. And Henry, calm, measured, quietly powerful, was about to test the boundaries of hers in ways she wasn't prepared for. Something told her this chapter of her life was far from over. And the real challenges had only just begun. Janelle couldn't shake the unease that had settled over her since leaving Henry's office. The streets of the city felt unusually loud, the hum of traffic and chatter pressing in around her like a reminder that she had stepped into a world far bigger than the one she'd known. By the time she returned home, her apartment felt smaller, almost suffocating. Trey was there, quietly drawing at the kitchen table, his pencil scratching softly across paper. She tried to focus on him, on the normalcy of his movements, but her mind kept returning to Henry and the carefully arranged folder, the clinic, the maps, the resources. He had acted with precision, but it wasn't just efficiency, it was control, subtle and deliberate. And she couldn't help but wonder how far that control would stretch. That evening, she finally opened the envelope Henry had left her earlier in the week, the one that had been heavy with promise and anticipation. Inside, she found not only a note but a set of documents detailing financial assistance, access to medical specialists, and even a few opportunities for her to further her education. Her fingers trembled as she sifted through them. Relief battled with skepticism, and deep down, a flicker of fear whispered that nothing came without strings attached. A knock at the door startled her. Trey looked up and she quickly folded the papers, slipping them into a drawer. "Janelle?" "It's me," said a familiar voice. Henry stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, carrying the calm authority that always made her heart skip. "I wanted to make sure you got everything okay," he said. I did," she replied, keeping her tone neutral. She forced a smile. "Thanks." He didn't sit. He moved around the apartment with measured steps, taking in the modest space without comment. There was no judgment, but the awareness of being watched settled like a weight on her shoulders. "I hope you don't feel overwhelmed," he said finally, voice softening. "I just want to make sure you and Trey have what you need." Over the next hour, Janelle realized something subtle but undeniable. Henry's presence shifted the air in the room. He wasn't controlling, not exactly. But every gesture, every choice of words, carried the quiet pressure of someone used to having influence over situations. He guided conversations, steered decisions, and yet did it with a veneer of care. By the time he left, Janelle felt exhausted, as if the calm reassurance he offered had simultaneously tethered her to a new set of expectations. Later that night, she lay in bed, Trey asleep beside her, staring at the ceiling. She couldn't ignore the growing realization. Henry's help, though genuine in intent, came with subtle manipulations. He knew how to lead without forcing, to nudge without appearing to. The question gnawed at her. Was she stepping into genuine assistance, or into a carefully constructed dependency? She reached for her phone and typed a message she didn't send. "Can I trust him completely?" The words stared back at her in the blank screen. She didn't have an answer. And somewhere, across the city, Henry reviewed the day in his own quiet way, unaware that even the most careful planning couldn't anticipate the ripple of doubt he had just created. Janelle felt the first real tremor of the second major plot twist. The subtle tension between gratitude and unease, hope and fear, trust and wariness. It was the point of no return, and she hadn't even realized it yet. Tomorrow, she knew, would demand a decision, one that could shift everything in ways she couldn't yet see. The storm was coming. Janelle woke before dawn, the apartment wrapped in that quiet hour where the city hadn't fully decided to breathe yet. Trey was still asleep, curled on his side, one hand tucked under his cheek. She watched him for a long moment, memorizing the steady rise and fall of his chest, the softness of his face when worry wasn't weighing him down. Her mind wouldn't rest. Henry's voice replayed in fragments. His calm explanations. The way he moved through her space as if he belonged there, not arrogantly, but with an ease that unsettled her. The resources. The plans. The way her life now seemed mapped out on someone else's screen. She got up quietly and made coffee, the machine hissing softly in the small kitchen. The smell grounded her, if only a little. As she leaned against the counter, mug warming her hands, she admitted something she hadn't wanted to say out loud. Part of her liked the relief Henry brought. Not just the money or the clinic or the promises. The certainty. The sense that someone else had noticed the cracks she'd been desperately patching on her own. That someone had stepped in before everything collapsed. That realization scared her more than the envelope ever had. Later that morning, her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't an unknown number. "Henry. I'm nearby," the message read. "Coffee?" No agenda. Just a conversation. She stared at the screen for a long time. No agenda. The words felt intentional, carefully chosen. She almost declined. Almost told herself she needed space. But curiosity, mixed with something warmer and more dangerous, nudged her forward. They met at a small cafe not far from her apartment. It wasn't polished like the Willow. The tables were mismatched, the floors slightly uneven. Henry looked different here. Less contained. More human. He stood when he saw her. "Thank you for coming." "I didn't say yes yet," she replied, half smiling as she slid into the chair across from him. He chuckled softly. "Fair." For a few minutes they talked about nothing important. The weather. The neighborhood. Trey's drawing habits. It felt almost normal, and that normalcy disarmed her more than any grand gesture could have. Then Henry's expression shifted, just slightly. "I want to be honest with you," he said, "because I can feel you pulling back." Janelle stiffened. "I'm not pulling back. I'm trying to understand where I stand." "That's fair," he said. "But you should know something. I didn't step into your life on impulse." She met his gaze. "I figured." He took a breath. "I grew up watching people disappear into systems that promised help and delivered control. I swore I'd never become that. But power has a way of blurring intentions." There it was. The first crack in his certainty. "So which side are you on now?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. The pause stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. "That's what I'm still figuring out," he admitted. The honesty caught her off guard. Before she could respond, Henry's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. He silenced it, but the shift in his demeanor was unmistakable. "What is it?" Janelle asked. "Work," he said quickly. Too quickly. She studied him. "You don't have to pretend with me." Another pause. Then he sighed. "Someone from my board has been asking questions. About personal expenditures. About you." Her heart skipped. "Me?" "Yes," he said. "They don't like uncertainty. Or unsanctioned generosity." The air between them changed. What had felt personal suddenly felt exposed, like their private connection had been dragged under fluorescent lights. "So this isn't just about kindness," she said slowly. "There are people watching." "There always are," Henry replied. "I tried to keep you outside of that. But once money moves, attention follows." Janelle leaned back, her pulse quickening. "You should have told me." "I know," he said. "That's on me." For the first time since they met, she saw something close to fear in his eyes. Not for himself. For what his choices might cost her. "I won't let this hurt Trey," she said firmly. "Or me." Henry nodded. "I wouldn't ask you to." They sat in silence, the cafe's low murmur filling the space between them. Janelle realized this was the moment everything shifted. Not because of a grand reveal, but because the safety she'd felt now came with visible risks. As they stood to leave, Henry hesitated. "If this becomes too much, say the word. I'll step back." She searched his face, wondering if that was a promise he could actually keep. "I will," she said. But as she walked home, the weight of the conversation followed her. Henry wasn't just a man offering help anymore. He was a man standing at the edge of a much larger machine. And she was already inside its shadow. That night, as she tucked Trey into bed, her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Henry. It was a message from an unfamiliar name. "We need to talk about the man who's been helping you." Her breath caught. The second major twist was no longer approaching. It had arrived. The next morning, Janelle woke with a tight knot in her stomach. The mysterious message from the previous night lingered like a shadow she couldn't shake. Who had sent it? And what did they know about Henry, or about her? Trey was already up, chattering quietly about a new game he wanted to play after school. Janelle forced a smile, hiding the unease twisting her chest. She needed to stay calm for him, but the words from the message echoed relentlessly in her mind. "We need to talk about the man who's been helping you." She tried to reason it away. Maybe it was spam. Maybe someone had overheard something. But a gnawing feeling told her it was more than that. Someone was watching, and they knew about Henry's involvement. After dropping Trey off at school, she drove to the small park near her apartment, hoping the open space and morning sunlight would help clear her mind. She sat on a bench, gripping her coffee cup tightly, and tried to piece together what she knew. Henry had been careful, thoughtful, generous. But the message reminded her that generosity often attracts attention, and attention in Henry's world wasn't always benign. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft chime of her phone. A call this time. Unknown number. Janelle Brooks? A firm, clipped voice asked. Yes, she replied cautiously. This is Detective Simmons, the voice said. We need to meet. It's about the man helping you and your brother. Your safety, and his, depends on this conversation. Her heart raced. Detective, what is this about? You'll understand when we meet, he said. Come to the station downtown. Alone. Immediately. The line went dead before she could ask another question. She sat frozen, coffee cooling in her hand. The weight of the morning pressed on her. Everything she had felt safe with Henry's help, Trey's new medical care, the envelope, the note, now felt fragile as if one wrong step could topple it all. Her mind raced. Should she call Henry? Warn him? Or should she go as instructed and find out what was happening? She decided she couldn't stay still. She drove downtown, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. The city felt different this morning. Every pedestrian, every passing car seemed to carry potential danger. She had never felt so exposed. When she arrived at the station, the receptionist directed her to a small, nondescript office. Detective Simmons was waiting. Middle-aged, serious, his eyes sharp, assessing her like he could see everything at once. Ms. Brooks, he began without preamble. You don't know us and you don't know him. But the man who's been helping you, Henry Caldwell, has connections that could put you in serious danger if people with less noble intentions find out about your family. Janelle felt a chill creep up her spine. Danger? What do you mean? Simmons leaned forward. There are people in his world, people who don't play fair, people who notice generosity and see opportunities. He's powerful, yes, but not untouchable. And now, because he's involved in your lives, you're visible too. Her mind went blank for a moment, the weight of the words sinking in. Everything she had accepted, every moment of hope, every step toward trusting him, it had painted a target on her back. And he doesn't know? She asked quietly. He knows, Simmons replied. But even he can't control everything. That's why you needed to come here. Now you understand why caution is necessary. Janelle swallowed hard, heart pounding. Every instinct screamed at her that this was bigger than she had realized. Henry's careful planning, the notes, the envelope, all had been protective in intent, but the world he moved in had dangers she hadn't seen coming. Leaving the station, the afternoon sun felt heavy, oppressive even. She needed to reach Henry, to warn him, to make sure he understood that the delicate balance he had created might already be tipping. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Henry. Are you okay? His message was brief, direct, yet tinged with concern. She hesitated, fingers hovering over the screen. Should she tell him everything? Could she trust him to respond the right way? Her thumb hovered and then decisively she typed. Not exactly. We need to talk. It's serious. The city around her blurred as she felt the weight of the new reality. Henry's world and her own were colliding, and the consequences were no longer abstract. They were immediate, and they were dangerous. Janelle's hands shook as she waited for Henry to arrive at her apartment. The city outside seemed louder than usual, every car horn, every shout, every siren slicing through the quiet of her living room like a warning bell. She had read Detective Simmons' warning over and over in her mind, trying to make sense of it. Henry's generosity, the clinic, the envelope, the careful planning, had put them all in a dangerous spotlight. When the knock finally came at the door, her heart jumped. Trey peeked from behind her, wide-eyed. Mom, is that him? Janelle nodded, trying to keep her voice steady. Yes, baby. It's okay. Just stay back a little. Henry stepped in, closing the door gently behind him. He wasn't in a suit this time, just casual clothes, but there was still an aura of control about him that made Janelle feel both comforted and tense at the same time. Detective Simmons? He asked immediately, scanning her expression. Janelle shook her head. He warned me, but didn't say much. Just that we're visible now. That people in your world, they notice. Henry's jaw tightened, his gaze drifting to Trey for a brief moment before returning to her. I suspected that might happen, he said quietly. But I didn't expect it to escalate this quickly. Trey shuffled closer to Janelle. Mom, are we in trouble? Janelle knelt beside him, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. Not if we're careful. And if Henry helps us, we'll be okay. She looked up at Henry and he met her eyes, silent understanding passing between them. Henry ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. They're not criminals in the traditional sense. But they're powerful. And they don't like generosity that disrupts their control. Helping someone like you, it makes us visible to them. Janelle felt the weight of the words settle in her chest. This wasn't just about kindness anymore, it was about survival. And for the first time, she realized that the man who had seemed like a benevolent stranger was also someone fighting a battle she hadn't fully understood. We need a plan, she said, her voice firmer than she felt. We can't just wait for them to make a move. Henry nodded. Agreed. I have contacts who can discreetly monitor activity. We'll keep a low profile for now. But some exposure is inevitable. We need to protect Trey first and foremost. They spent the next hour mapping out precautions. Henry suggested routes to the clinic that avoided obvious surveillance, flagged potential risks in their neighborhood, and even provided backup contacts for emergencies. Janelle listened, absorbing every detail, her mind racing. She realized that her life had been thrust into a realm she had never imagined, one where kindness carried consequences, and trust could be both a shield and a vulnerability. By the time Henry left, the sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows across the apartment. Trey was asleep, and Janelle sat at the kitchen table, staring at the list of precautions Henry had left behind. Her phone buzzed again. A simple text from Henry. We'll handle this together. But remember, caution and trust must go hand in hand. Janelle read it over twice, feeling a strange mix of reassurance and tension. This was no longer just about medical care or financial help. It was about navigating a world she hadn't seen before, with a man who wielded power in ways that both comforted and terrified her. She leaned back, rubbing her eyes. Every choice now had consequences. Every connection carried risk. And yet, she couldn't deny that she trusted him, despite the danger, despite the uncertainty. Somewhere in the shadows of the city, the first moves of their unseen enemies were already in motion. And Janelle knew that the next days would test everything: her courage, her judgment, and the fragile trust she had begun to place in Henry. For the first time, she understood that survival wasn't just about avoiding danger. It was about choosing who to stand with when the storm came. And the storm was coming faster than she could have imagined. The next morning, Janelle awoke to an uneasy stillness in the apartment. Trey was already at the table, quietly eating breakfast, but his small movements seemed more tentative than usual, as if he sensed the invisible tension lingering in the air. Janelle sipped her coffee slowly, staring out the window at the city streets below. Every passerby, every honk, every hurried step felt amplified, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The message from Detective Simmons, the warning, Henry's cautious guidance, all of it collided in her mind. She felt like a pawn suddenly thrust into a game she didn't understand, but one where one misstep could be dangerous. Her phone buzzed. It was Henry. I'll be there in 30. We need to review potential threats. Stay alert. Her stomach twisted. Alert. That word carried weight now more than it ever had. She had been wary before, but now she understood the seriousness. The stakes had escalated. When Henry arrived, he was different from the calm, measured man she had come to know. His usual quiet authority was now laced with tension. Every movement was precise, purposeful. The energy he carried filled the apartment, a mixture of reassurance and warning. We need to talk about who might be watching, he said without preamble. And how we handle it. Janelle nodded, trying to steady herself. I want to understand everything. I want to protect Trey. Henry moved to the small table, pulling out a folder. Inside were notes, images, schedules, and even surveillance photos that tracked potential observers, people who had been seen near her apartment, near the clinic, and even near Trey's school. You see them? he asked, tapping a photo. These people aren't just curious. They're evaluating, measuring, waiting for a mistake. Her chest tightened. Why us? Why me? Henry's gaze softened for a brief moment. Because I acted. Because someone who notices strength and vulnerability, who cares, always draws attention. I can shield you, but only if we're smart, only if you trust me enough to follow the plan. Janelle swallowed hard. She realized the gravity of the situation. This was no longer just about generosity or care. The stakes had shifted into a more dangerous, unpredictable territory. Hours passed as they reviewed routes, schedules, and safe zones. Henry instructed her on subtle methods of awareness, teaching her to notice small signs of danger without becoming paranoid. Every tip, every precaution heightened both her confidence and her tension. Finally, Henry leaned back, his expression grave. Tomorrow is critical. You'll need to move through your day as usual, but stay aware. If anything feels off, trust your instincts and contact me immediately. Janelle nodded, the responsibility heavy on her shoulders. I understand. Before leaving, Henry placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We'll get through this. But know this, the world we're in now, it doesn't forgive mistakes easily. Stay sharp. As the door closed behind him, Janelle felt a surge of fear and resolve. The quiet tension of the morning had given way to an active awareness of the dangers around her. Every glance outside, every sound in the apartment, was a reminder that the storm was approaching. That night, as she tucked Trey into bed, she felt the weight of responsibility pressing down. Protecting him, navigating this new reality, and maintaining trust in Henry, it all seemed almost impossible. And yet, deep in her chest, she knew they had no choice but to face it together. The next day would test her courage, her judgment, and the fragile balance between hope and danger. And somewhere in the shadows of the city, their unseen observers were already making their first moves. The next morning dawned gray and quiet, the city streets unusually empty, as if the world itself had sensed what was coming. Janelle had barely slept, her mind cycling through every warning, every precaution Henry had given her. Every shadow seemed sharper, every passerby suspicious. She kept glancing at Trey, sleeping peacefully in the next room, and it nearly broke her heart to realize how fragile this moment of calm truly was. She didn't have much time before school, so she quickly prepared breakfast, keeping her movements steady and deliberate. Every sound, the clatter of a spoon, the hum of the coffee maker, felt amplified, like it was announcing their presence to the unseen watchers. Her phone buzzed and her heart jumped. It was Henry. I'm outside. Move quietly. Follow the plan. She glanced at Trey, who was already halfway to the school bus stop. She grabbed his hand and whispered, "Stay close, baby. Don't let go, okay?" Trey nodded, his small hand gripping hers like a lifeline. When Henry arrived, he was already scanning the street, alert and unshakable. There was no trace of the calm man she had met at the cafe or in the clinic. This Henry was a strategist, every gesture purposeful, every glance measuring the surroundings. "Keep your phone off," he said softly. "Stay aware. Trust your instincts. Move exactly as we planned." They walked together, Trey between them, a trio moving through the city like shadows. Janelle's senses were heightened to a painful degree. Every car that slowed, every figure on the sidewalk, every reflective window made her pulse spike. As they approached the clinic, a black SUV slowed on the street beside them. The tinted windows obscured the passengers, but Janelle noticed the way the driver's gaze lingered. Henry's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, guiding her without a word. "They're testing us," he whispered. "Don't react. Keep moving." Her stomach churned, fear and adrenaline intertwining. She realized for the first time that this was no longer a hypothetical danger. Their presence was being watched, measured, analyzed. They entered the clinic, and for a brief moment, the warmth and normalcy of the space provided a fleeting relief. But Henry didn't relax. He led them through a side entrance, bypassing the usual waiting areas. Inside he finally spoke. "They know who you are. They know about Trey. And they know about me. But right now we're safe. For a few hours at least. This is where the plan starts." Janelle's chest tightened. The plan? Yes, Henry said. We have to be proactive. You can't just hide or wait. You have to move while staying invisible. Do exactly as I say. Hours passed as they executed Henry's carefully coordinated strategy. Janelle followed his instructions with trembling hands and heightened awareness. Every turn, every pause, every interaction was calculated to keep them safe and untraceable. And then, as they exited the clinic in the late afternoon, Janelle noticed a figure on the sidewalk, a man in a gray coat, seemingly distracted but unmistakably observing them. Henry's eyes narrowed. He guided them into an alley, silent and deliberate. "This is your first direct encounter," he said softly. "Stay calm. Don't let fear control you." The man in gray passed by, unaware that he had been spotted, his brief glance enough to send a warning through both Henry and Janelle. Janelle felt her pulse racing. The abstract danger had become concrete. Someone was close, someone who could act at any moment. And for the first time, she understood the full magnitude of Henry's world, the way his generosity and attention carried consequences far beyond the immediate moment. That night, as she tucked Trey into bed, her hands trembled. The safe world she had known, her routines, her careful plans, was gone. The city was darkening as Janelle and Henry moved through the quiet streets, Trey nestled safely between them. The sun had dipped below the skyline, leaving shadows stretching long across the pavement, shadows that suddenly seemed heavier, more threatening. Henry's hand rested lightly on her back as they walked, his presence grounding her even as adrenaline made her heart race. "We're close," he said quietly. "Stay alert. They're waiting for an opening." Janelle swallowed hard, gripping Trey's hand tightly. The figure in the gray coat had vanished earlier, but she knew instinctively that it wasn't over. Whoever had been observing them wasn't just testing, they were preparing. As they turned a corner near a deserted alley, Janelle froze. Two men stepped out from the shadows, their faces obscured, their intentions unmistakable. Henry moved instantly, positioning himself between Janelle, Trey, and the approaching threat. His movements were fluid, precise, a careful balance of authority and protection. "Stay behind me," he whispered. The men didn't speak. Their eyes locked on Henry, then flicked to Janelle and Trey. It was clear, they weren't here to negotiate. Janelle's stomach churned, fear threatening to overwhelm her, but she forced herself to breathe, to stay steady. Every lesson Henry had given her, every precaution, every instruction flashed through her mind. She couldn't panic. Not now. Henry's voice cut through the tension, low and commanding. "Step back. Now." The men hesitated, then moved forward. One reached for his coat pocket and time seemed to slow. Henry's hand shot out, not in violence but with calculated precision. In a fluid motion, he disarmed the closest man, twisting the arm and forcing him against the alley wall. The second man froze, realizing the situation had shifted. Janelle's heart pounded. She had never seen such control, such calmness in the face of danger. And yet, beneath that composure, she sensed a quiet tension. Henry wasn't invincible. Every move carried risk. The men hesitated, then fled into the night, disappearing as quickly as they had appeared. Janelle sank against the alley wall, trembling. That was close," she whispered, her voice shaky. Henry crouched beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Too close," he admitted. "But now you understand. This isn't just about kindness or generosity. It's about survival. And you, Trey, and I, we have to be smart always." Trey clung to her side, eyes wide. "Mom, is it over?" Janelle pulled him close, heart still racing. "For now," she said, trying to sound reassuring. "But we have to be careful. Always." Henry looked at both of them, his gaze steady. "And that's why the choices we make matter. Trust, timing, and awareness, they can save lives." As they walked back toward their apartment, the adrenaline slowly ebbing, Janelle realized something profound. The danger had forced her to confront her fears, to trust Henry fully, and to acknowledge her own strength. She had survived the first direct confrontation, and the bond between her and Henry had deepened in ways that neither had anticipated. And yet, even as the adrenaline faded, she felt the lingering tension of the city around them, the sense that more challenges were coming, that the storm wasn't over, only shifting. Tonight she thought they had survived. But tomorrow would test everything again. The lines between help, trust, and danger had blurred irreversibly. And Janelle knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Morning arrived quietly, as if the city itself had decided to breathe gently after the chaos of the night before. Sunlight slipped through the thin curtains of the apartment, landing softly on the worn carpet, on the small dining table, on the life Janelle had spent years surviving rather than living. She sat at the edge of the bed watching Trey sleep. For the first time in a long while, his face was calm. No tension in his brow. No startled breaths. Just the peaceful stillness of a child who felt safe. Janelle pressed a hand to her chest, overwhelmed. A knock came at the door. Her heart skipped, not in fear this time but anticipation. When she opened it, Henry stood there alone. No security. No assistance. Just him. Dressed simply. Human. Vulnerable in a way she had never seen before. "I didn't want to wake him," he said softly. "You didn't," Janelle replied. He finally slept. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unspoken filling the space between them. Henry stepped inside and looked around the apartment. The peeling paint, the cracked window frame, the tiny kitchen. He had seen it before, but now he saw it differently. Not as a place of struggle, but as proof of endurance. "I've spent my life building walls," he said quietly. "Tall ones. Expensive ones. I thought they kept me safe." He turned to her. "But last night showed me something. Walls don't protect what matters. People do." Janelle felt tears sting her eyes. "I didn't help you because I wanted to be saved," she said. "I helped you because I didn't want my son to grow up believing kindness was weakness." Henry nodded slowly. "And you reminded me of the man I was before money taught me to hide." He reached into his coat and placed a folder on the table. "This isn't charity," he said before she could speak. "It's a choice. One I want us to make together." Inside was a deed. A modest house. Not a mansion. Not a symbol of wealth. Just a warm, permanent home in a quiet neighborhood. Close to schools. Parks. A future. Janelle's hands trembled. "I won't accept pity," she whispered. Henry met her eyes. "Good. Because this isn't pity. This is partnership. You work with my foundation. You help women who were once where you stood. And you let yourself finally rest." Tears fell freely now. For years Janelle had prayed, not for riches but for stability. For a place where her child could unpack his bags and know they wouldn't be moving again. She looked toward the bedroom door. "Trey deserves a life without running," she said. "So do you," Henry replied. A small voice interrupted them. "Mom?" They turned as Trey stood in the doorway rubbing his eyes. Janelle knelt instantly. "Hey baby. Are we okay?" he asked. She pulled him into her arms and smiled through tears. "Yes, we are." Henry knelt too, bringing himself to Trey's level. "You were very brave last night." Trey nodded solemnly. "I wasn't scared. I had my mom." Henry swallowed hard. "And she has you," he said. "That's real strength." Weeks later the move was quiet. No headlines. No cameras. Just boxes, laughter, and the sound of a door closing gently behind them, for the last time. The new house wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. On the first night, Janelle stood in the kitchen, listening to Trey laugh in his new room. The sound filled the walls, settled into them, claimed them. Henry watched from the doorway. "You stayed," she said softly. "I'm not running anymore," he replied. Outside the city moved on. Stories rose and fell. But inside that house, something rare had taken root. Not a fairy tale. Not a rescue. But a truth. That kindness, when given without conditions, can rewrite lives. That a child's safety can heal grown hearts. And that sometimes the richest thing a person can offer is simply a place to finally belong. The end.